Hi, my name is Catherine Rosasco-Mitchell, and I'm really honored to have you take time to listen to this presentation. The name of the presentation is Six Body to Brain Strategies, Movement, Children, and ADHD Research. The background of this presentation began after a meeting with researchers Dave Clark and Stuart Mostofsky at Kennedy Krieger and their study on attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, ADHD. I was trained with Moshe Feldenkrais, and he was a very ingenious physicist applying it to the human body. And also in Yoga Ed, Brain Gym, and Schools Attune. I've studied movement and movement in relation to consciousness and cognition for 40 years and focused specifically for 13 years in elementary schools. I've presented at national and international conferences, including Movement is Society for Research in Child Development and the Feldenkrais Neuroscience Conference. Just to introduce you to what I'll be talking about, I'm going to share some very serendipitous discovery of cognitive disorders and the relationship they have to movement patterns and cognitive skills. And then 6 strategies that were used and tested for 7 years in schools to experience this relationship between movement patterns and cognitive skills. And then finally, some suggestions to where to bring the strategies. My vision is to help improve the well-being of the next generation by educating the interconnections of movement, behavior, and cognition, and to introduce practical applications to the most recent cognitive and movement research studies for community programs happening now. And finally, in my hopes to advance science in cognitive disorders, especially in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. What is the problem? Children's challenges are skyrocketing. Depression, drug addiction, obesity, attention disorders are going off the charts, more than most of us even really realize. In the last 8 years, attention deficit diagnoses have increased 42%. That's 6.4 million children with ADHD symptoms, and this was from a survey done in 2017. It's probably more than that now. What we found in children with ADHD behaviors is they had a harder time being still, exhaling long, relaxing their chest, and feeling their bodies. Movement and cognition has been studied for centuries, really, and scientists used to separate the fields of mental skills and bodily movement. But now scientists claim mental skills could be cultivated by bodily movement. How is movement and cognition related? Movement is often thought of as a mechanical action that improves the health of our brain and our body. We exercise to help our body. But I'm talking about movement that has messages. What communicates in the brain is largely dependent on the messages sent from the body. The body is what is always moving. Spatial and motor processes provide information to self-stabilize perceptual processes. Movement is spatial and motor processes. These spatial and motor processes look for organization to form patterns. Movement patterns develop into achieving a task. Movement has a biological intelligence that impacts learning and the ability to grasp situations. My hypothesis is if children are taught embodied awareness, the motor patterns are re-educated, attention and well-being will improve. Why teach children embodied awareness? The organization of their physical movement patterns can result in a systems overload and affect attention deficit. If children could sense their bodies, they can feel the interconnections of action, attention, and listening. In adults, these interconnections from the body to the brain can be blocked, just like adults can block pain easier than children. Improvements from embodied awareness were easier to detect and happen quicker in children than in adults, especially with attention disorders. Movement used in a different way can teach so much more about how movement and the brain work. Yoga, for example, uses movement to teach the awareness of balances and imbalances in the body. Strategies can be used in yoga to feel the movement patterns within these balances. As I introduce these strategies, please keep in mind I'm teaching from the body to the brain, so learning the strategies is really by participatory knowledge. It's using motion to teach embodied awareness, so the body is teaching the brain. Strategies were tested in a trial program called Wellness Through Movement, which is a body-to-brain physical education program for elementary schools. Our pilot school was Kohala Elementary, and we were there for 7 years, from 2007 to 2014. There were 500 children at least involved, and we put children both with special needs and normal functioning in the same class. The ages were 5 to 10 years old, and the sizes of the class were about 20 kids per class. The strategies are broken down into 3 simple categories: biological urges, embodiment, and consciousness. Biological urges. Strategies 1 and 2, movement tendencies and cognitive actions. Strategy 1 is about movement tendencies. This means the strategy helps the participants get to know the nature of movement tendencies and translates these tendencies into verbal instructions. So basically, we're hooking the brain up to the body. We're helping the body recognize the tendencies, but not in an intellectual way, but instead giving the kids free time, for example, and watching what they do, and then copying their actions in a verbal direction. For example, if they come in wanting to climb and crawl over tables, we tell the children to climb and crawl over pillows. So the brain and the body get a feeling, oh, I'm already doing that movement. Oh, this is what my body wants to do. Strategy 2 is about cognitive actions. There's movement in every cognitive skill. We hook up the awareness of the physical actions during a cognitive skill, such as attention and listening. Take, for example, listening. Listening changes according to the direction of the attention. Here are children trying to put crayons back in a box while their teacher is trying to get their attention, but their ears can't hear. So we teach the kids how their ears can't hear and what happens when they can't hear. The next 3 strategies are about embodiment. In strategy 3 is embodied space, strategy 4 embodied awareness, and strategy 5 is embodied consciousness. Strategy 3, embodied space. This is really the heart of all the strategies. This strategy hooks up the sense of spatial awareness inside the body while in a situation. For example, we teach first spatial awareness. We start with a surrounding and make a boundary of that surrounding, and then we start to narrow the space down by adding hula hoops. So as the kids play personal bubbles freeze dance, they start to get aware of the space around them and the size of their body. The next part of strategy 3 is spatial awareness inside the body. Here, we're taking attention and we're using long exhalations and sound to bring attention down into the body, and the children feel where that sound and exhalation stops. We call that place home. And then we ask them to remember that feeling. This is one way to help the children remember. This strategy is actually a school-wide program called Get Sensational Attention, and it's free at Wellness Through Movement. Please feel free to log into that and see the whole dialogue of what that program is all about. There's also a user guide for the teachers. So strategy 3 teaches spatial awareness outside and around them until they find their body, and then inside them, and then puts the two together, the spatial awareness inside the body and the spatial awareness around them. And goes back to the game, Personal Bubbles Freeze Dance. And when the children are in home while they're playing Personal Bubbles Freeze Dance, something astonishing and exciting happen. Immediately, their spatial awareness improved. We were able to play the music longer without having to stop the music when they bumped. We used this home to help them communicate what was going on inside of them to somebody else that was having either trouble with them or they had a difficulty learning. And it helped them become more empathetic with others and also explain what was going on inside them easier. And finally, their social emotional health improved tremendously. The group was astounding. Group of third graders taking care of each other. But this strategy, being still to tap into home and feeling spatial awareness, was very difficult for the children with attention deficit disorders. They had a harder time being still and exhaling long, and they couldn't feel their body. And something really exciting happened while I was doing the research for this presentation. I found this research study called Rubber Hand Illusion, and it was fascinating. They found that even normal functioning people could not identify with their body parts from the fake body parts and their actions to the lab technician's actions. So basically, when they felt a fake hand and the lab technician was touching the real hand, they couldn't tell they were touching a fake hand. And the action was very elusive to them, who was touching what. What does this tell us? This sense of body awareness and embodiment is lacking in almost all of us, and maybe we need training in it. And maybe if we feel more about what we're doing, we'll know more of how we come across with others, how what we're doing to what we think we're doing is really happening. And especially with children in attention deficit, helping to feel how their body is connected to their brain may help improve how cognition operates. Let's look at some other research. Movement related to cognition. Movement begins with primal reflexes, and according to the successes and failures of those actions, the actions of the successes are repeated. Successes organize into movement patterns and inform the brain which actions matched or mismatched with the desired outcome. And when those movement patterns match the desired outcomes, these movement patterns developed a muscle toneness. That muscle toneness, the operation of toneness, informs the brain what is considered possible. What is physically possible starts to tell the brain what is really possible. So let's dive into how can we teach embodied awareness? How can we teach the awareness of those real body parts? Physical properties are sensed in the body by what Newton calls forces. And within these forces, there's weight, pressure, space, shape, and all of these forces are easier to sense in motion or against a firm, flat surface. To clarify the organization of how the body is lying, where the body is in space, how it's organized, what's touching, what's heavy, what's light on the floor. We have the kids do what's called pancake body. And basically, that's just lying on the floor and helping them feel what is touching the body from the floor and what is up off of the body and the relationship of these body parts. So as the body is resting on the floor, it can sense what parts are touching and not touching, and how the body holds an organization of movement patterns. These movement patterns start to touch the floor in different ways, and maybe there's parts of the body that can't be felt. This is just a very simple kind of diagram of what the brain may be perceiving that's going on in the body. With attention deficit kids, the feeling of what's going on in their body is very elusive. They had a harder time even sensing any parts of their body touching the floor, and how the body was organized on the floor. You could see kind of an awkward torque in the motor pattern. So pancake body kind of teaches the kid to be able to feel the differences between their body before and after a movement lesson. Strategy 5. Strategy 5, Embodied Cognition. Strategy 5 compares physical changes to cognitive changes. We do that by doing the pancake body lesson before and after every movement lesson. In pancake body, children note how their body is resting at the beginning of a movement program, feeling the organization, the muscle toneness, the forces, and then compares the changes in their body at the end of the movement lesson. Then we ask them if they notice at the end of the lesson if it's easier for them to lie still, or if maybe they can listen to us easier than when they first came in the classroom. Finally, we ask them if the changes could be related, if they can feel anything in their body that makes them able to listen easier. Strategy 6, Movement Intelligence. The strategy is about the movement intelligence behind consciousness. Strategy 6, Analyze the organization of movement patterns related to cognitive behavior and re-educate those patterns. Strategy 6 involves all 6 strategies and moves into reorganizing the movement intelligence by first analyzing the awkward movements. For example, one of the lessons is called the fish roll. We have the children roll to a cone and ask them to see how it feels when they roll to the cone and if they can reach the cone. Many children have challenges having the intention to reach the cone and actually rolling to the cones, especially the children with attention deficit disorder. None of them were able to reach a cone, and the organization of their roll was very awkward. Clasping their hands or feet was very difficult for them. We do a series of 12 movement lessons that re-educate the organization of movement by first comparing the awkward movement patterns to developmental movement and re-educate the patterns through motion. In strategy 6, when we see the changes in movement organization, we look for changes in behavior and see if there was any relationship and how the structure and the movement of the structure affected the cognitive functioning of that child. In the last class we did give out a parental survey. The parents with normal functioning children reported that the biggest improvement was the general overall well-being. What was what was interesting was that the children were able to sustain the improvements for a longer period of time. We didn't do a follow-up on exactly how long, but we do have reports from the teacher and principal that we will be talking about later. In the parental survey with the attention deficit functioning behaviors, such as the behaviors of being non-responsive to directions, or feeling hyperactive, or having no social emotional awareness, or not being able to speak. By the end of the 12 lessons, the reorganization of the movement, children were able to sit quietly longer. They were able to listen and follow more directions at one time. They had more social and spatial awareness with their peers, and they had a longer attention span. We were in the schools for 13 years, and the children with the ADHD behaviors showed that every time when the motor patterns re-educated, there was about 50 cases out of maybe 500 where when the motor patterns re-educated within 24 to 48 hours, behavior, attention, and listening all showed signs of improvement. The feedback from the teacher and principal that was in the last class that we did said, improvements of ADHD symptoms sustained years later, according to the Kohala kindergarten teacher, and behavior and learning improved campus-wide, according to the principal Garcia at Kohala Elementary. The sixth strategy can be demonstrated and is astonishing to watch. The limitations of the strategies are the first 5 are relatively simple and safe, and I think easy to grasp. The sixth strategy takes practice, how to analyze awkward movements in relationship to cognitive disorders. And all the sustained improvements with the children happened in schools that applied strategy 3, embodied space, specifically the strategy about finding home inside. In closure, where do we go from here? We want to help children be everything that they can be. But today, without costing much money or time, embodied awareness can integrate into existing movement programs and research studies. Teach children about their mind-body systems, and they become active participants in addressing their challenges. Results were based on real-life stories, not formal research. Some of the research questions that I would ask is, can embodied awareness sustain the health benefits of movement? And if children can feel embodied awareness, could they team up with their teachers and doctors to help them address their challenges? And 3, if taught embodied awareness at a young age, would it help to guide and sustain the sense of well-being? And 4, do motor patterns have to be re-educated to improve cognitive disorders? My hopes is that the first 5 strategies will show an influence on cognitive disorders without having to re-educate the motor pattern. But again, I'm willing to show how to do that and look into that more on how that is related to the development of cognition. In closing, I just want to say that problems with cognitive disorders occur on many levels. Brain systems, sensations, movements, emotions, etc. We know movement helps the body and brain work better. Strategies use movement to bring the brain and body together. Movement is reframed as both an action and as an informant that bridges the gaps between these levels. Together with community members and researchers, strategies is one way to bring current research into daily living for our children and improve the well-being of the next generation. In closing, I want to thank you, Kohala community, Principal Garcia and the Kohala Elementary School, Board of Directors of Wellness Through Movement, Susie Jones at Hawaii Preparatory Academy, the school counselors and behavioral specialists at Kohala, Parker, and HPA schools, community members, and most importantly, the children. Mahalo also to our funders, 21st Century Grant, anonymous community members, First Hawaiian Bank, and our fiscal agent, North Hawaii Community Resource Center. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to this YouTube video. These are some of the questions that other attendees that listen to this lesson asked, and I'm just going to scroll through these questions to maybe help researchers get a sense of more of the message behind this presentation. And if you'd like to contact us, just check us out at Wellness Through Movement. Aloha. Thank you for listening.